get so emotional because I feel like shooting the show, it taught me that my capacity to love is deep.
Something just happened inside Paramount that nobody expected to see play out this publicly. According to multiple industry sources, Paramount Plus has canceled Starfleet Academy after just one season. On the surface, that sounds like a routine streaming decision. But behind the scenes, reports suggest something far more explosive. A coordinated backlash from across the legacy of Star Trek universe itself. Not one voice, not a small disagreement, but a multi-generation reaction involving cast members from the original era, the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and even newer productions. And according to insiders, this wasn't just criticism, it was pressure. In entertainment, cancellations happen all the time. But what makes this situation different is what allegedly came before it. Sources claim that before the cancellation decision, Paramount faced a rare and unusually direct confrontation from key figures across Star Trek's legacy cast ecosystem. And the core issue being raised wasn't scheduling, budgets, or ratings alone. It was the creative direction of modern Star Trek itself. Starfleet Academy was positioned as a new entry point into the Star Trek universe, a fresh cast, a younger perspective, a new narrative direction inside the established franchise. But according to internal reactions and early audience response, the show struggled to connect in the way Paramount had hoped. Viewership reportedly underperformed expectations, and fan discussion quickly became divided. And that division is what reportedly opened the door to something much bigger. Because once the show premiered, conversations began spreading across the wider Star Trek community, including actors from multiple eras of the franchise. Reports suggest that cast members across different generations of Star Trek began privately comparing notes about the direction of the franchise. From the original series era, including figures such as William Shatner, to actors associated with the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, concerns reportedly started aligning around a shared theme. What they were seeing on screen didn't feel like the Star Trek they believed in, not because of diversity, not because of modern themes, but because of how those elements were being presented. According to sources familiar with internal discussions, the criticism wasn't about Star Trek exploring social ideas. Star Trek has always done that. From its earliest episodes, the franchise used science fiction as a mirror for real-world issues. Episodes like Let That Be Your Last Battlefield from the original series directly addressed racism through allegory, not literal political instruction. Later shows like The Next Generation explored morality, identity, and ethics through layered storytelling that left space for interpretation. Deep Space Nine introduced war, religion, and political conflict in ways that challenged viewers without dictating conclusions. That, according to the legacy cast, is what made Star Trek powerful. The concern now, as they reportedly expressed it, is that newer productions are shifting away from that storytelling approach. The situation reportedly escalated into a formal meeting between legacy Star Trek figures and Paramount leadership. Multiple cast members allegedly participated, spanning different eras of the franchise. And the tone of that meeting, according to insiders, was unusually direct. The central argument presented was that modern Star Trek content, including Starfleet Academy, was placing too much emphasis on contemporary messaging frameworks at the expense of character-driven storytelling. One phrase, reportedly spoken during a heated exchange, stood out internally: "Enough woke." That statement, according to sources, wasn't meant as a slogan, but as frustration boiling over after years of creative disagreement. Industry insiders emphasized that the criticism was not framed as opposition to diversity or inclusion. Instead, the concern centered on execution. The argument being made was that Star Trek's strength has always come from showing a future where people work together beyond division, not focusing stories primarily on separation or grievance as narrative drivers. In other words, the issue wasn't what ideas were being explored, it was how they were being structured into storytelling. The veterans reportedly argued that when messaging becomes the primary focus rather than character and narrative, the emotional impact of science fiction weakens. At the center of the criticism was also broader frustration with current creative leadership within the franchise. One name frequently mentioned in industry reporting is Alex Kurtzman, who has overseen much of the modern Star Trek television output. According to the legacy cast's perspective, the concern was not personal, but structural. They reportedly argued that Star Trek's current direction reflects a shift toward franchise management driven by spectacle, modern franchise pacing, and topical writing, rather than the slower, idea-focused storytelling that defined earlier eras. This disagreement, according to insiders, has been building for years. The situation reportedly intensified when legacy cast members made it clear that their concerns would not remain private if ignored. According to sources, they communicated that they were prepared to publicly distance themselves from current Star Trek productions if the direction did not change. That would include reduced participation in franchise promotion, avoidance of reunion appearances, and public commentary on the state of the franchise. For Paramount, that represented a major risk, because Star Trek's modern value is not only in new content, but in its legacy trust. The Star Trek brand is uniquely dependent on long-term audience loyalty. Unlike newer franchises, its cultural weight is deeply tied to decades of accumulated goodwill. So, when legacy figures begin publicly criticizing current output, the impact is amplified. It doesn't just affect one show, it affects the perception of the entire franchise. According to insiders, that pressure played a major role in the cancellation decision. The decision, Starfleet Academy, canceled. Shortly after internal review discussions, Paramount reportedly decided to cancel Starfleet Academy after its first season. The public statement avoided linking the cancellation to creative disagreements, but internally, sources suggest the reasoning was more complex. It was not only about performance, it was about avoiding long-term damage to the franchise's credibility during an already sensitive moment. The response from fans has been immediate and divided. One group sees the cancellation as validation of long-standing concerns about modern Star Trek storytelling direction. They argue that the franchise had drifted away from its roots in thoughtful science fiction and was becoming too focused on topical messaging. Another group strongly disagrees. They argue that Star Trek has always been political, always progressive, and that its ability to reflect society is part of its identity. For them, the criticism itself feels like a rejection of Star Trek's historical purpose. This is where the argument becomes larger than one show. At its core, the debate is about interpretation. One perspective sees Star Trek as a storytelling universe where ideas are explored through narrative complexity and allegory. The other sees it as a platform that directly engages with modern social discourse in explicit form. Both sides claim to be defending Gene Roddenberry's original vision, just in different ways. And that tension is now shaping the franchise's future direction. Hollywood observers are treating this situation as unusual for one key reason. Legacy cast members rarely influence active production decisions at this scale. But Star Trek is different, because its audience is uniquely loyal to its history. That gives veteran actors and creators more influence than is typical in modern franchise ecosystems. And that influence, in this case, appears to have had real consequences. Inside Paramount, reports suggest ongoing internal debate about the future of the franchise. Some voices reportedly support restructuring creative leadership and reevaluating current storytelling approaches. Others argue that the current direction is aligned with modern audience expectations and should continue. There is also discussion about bringing in new creative leadership with experience on critically acclaimed science fiction projects such as Battlestar Galactica, The Expanse, and For All Mankind. Shows often cited as examples of balancing character depth with large-scale thematic storytelling. Right now, Star Trek universe is facing a moment of structural uncertainty. Starfleet Academy is gone. Internal creative direction is under review. And legacy voices from across multiple eras are actively questioning the franchise's current identity. Whether this becomes a reset moment or a deeper fracture depends entirely on what comes next. Because what's clear from this situation is simple. Star Trek is no longer operating in a space where decisions go unchallenged. The legacy is now part of the conversation. The fans are part of the conversation. And the people who built the franchise are watching closely. If this situation develops further, leadership changes, new show announcements, or further fallout, it could reshape the entire future of Star Trek as a modern franchise. So stay tuned, because this story is still unfolding behind the scenes, and the next move from Paramount might determine whether Star Trek evolves into a stronger era or